Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular meeting for Monday, June 26, 2023. I'd ask that everyone present please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batkins. Here. Mr. Brado.
Here.
Mr. Olgiati.
Here.
Mrs. Rose has to be excused. Mr. Tominello. Here. Mr. Witt here. Mr. Verkust.
Here. Thank you. Next is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes of June 12th, 2023, approval to purchase 10 fire hydrants, valves, extensions, and valve boxes, approval of the bills in approval of the bills in the amount of $1,428,193.36. Approval of the May revenue and expenditure report. Unless there's any changes, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Support.
I've got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Tominello. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is approval of the agenda. Board members, I'm not aware of any revisions to the agenda. If there are none, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
All right, is there support?
Support.
We've got a motion by Mr. Brado with support by Mr. Olgiati. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comments, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is announcements. I do have a few announcements. The Macomb County Department of Roads has several ongoing projects this summer. You can visit the township website for a quick and easy link to the pages that show the projects in the area. You can also follow the Department of Roads on their social media outlets for reminders and updates on their projects. The Detroit Institute of Arts has chosen Harrison Township to display 8 famous art replicas that are installed in accessible places throughout the community. The DIA developed this program to encourage everyone to view, explore, and appreciate fine art, and also encourage them to come to the DIA and visit the actual museum. For a full list of our locations, you can visit our township website. The Harrison Township Library has many exciting summer programs. Beginning this Wednesday, June 28th, the library has their baby play group with Miss Tina. You can visit the library's website for a list of their programs and offerings. We are working on an update of our website and a refreshing, so over the next few months, if you have photos of our beautiful township that you would like to share as backgrounds and scenes on our website, please send them to our Deputy Supervisor Stephanie's email, smiddlestedt, MITTELSTEDT, at harrisontownshipmi.gov, or you can just call the supervisor's office for more information, 586-466-1445. And also, you can visit our website, harrisontownshipmi.gov, and you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at harrisontwpmi. Any announcements, updates, maybe on the concert or anything else?
Yeah, we had our first concert last Thursday. Hung Up was the band. It was actually a couple of ex-Harrison Township residents were actually in the band. They've since moved on. Yeah, they're a really good band. We had a really good turnout. Library was there. Had snacks and stuff for sale. It was a great night. So our next concert is on July 27th at 6 a.m. and
6 p.m.
Did I say 6 a.m.?
You did.
We're going to see how many people show up.
Yeah. The condo associations are pretty excited on either side about it.
6 p.m., excuse me, and the band is the Blue Cat Band.
All right.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah. Any other announcements from the board?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor, taxes will be in the mail by July 1st, so expect them in your homes shortly after.
Okay, and those bills are due?
Those bills are due September 14th.
Gotcha. All right. Okay. If there's no other announcements, I'd like to invite our County Commissioner, Mrs. Barbara Zinner, to the podium to give us an update on county events and happenings and news.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Hello, everyone. The last time I was here, I talked about the jail and center that is up there for a project that they're trying to figure out how to pay for, working on building. It's not being built now. It isn't even approved. I told you that it's $129 million. They need 50 million more is what I told you. I knew they needed 100 million, but it wasn't public yet, so I didn't tell you that. Now that it's been public, I wanted to be sure to tell you. I did that at the Shores meeting because then it was public. So I wanted to be sure you knew that, the citizens knew that. They still are hoping to get the 50 million from a grant from the state. The legislature has been busy passing things for us. I'm not real happy about some of it, but they've been busy. But I know that the leadership in the county has been down there always. They're always after them trying to get that money. As I said, for anyone who has not heard, for the citizens, I'll repeat it briefly. The jail was built in the 50s. They restructured jails. Now, from that period of time, citizens have changed. Restructuring buildings is different than it was then. They don't have corridors where they're turned and hard to see people as they're going around them. They like everything very visual now. People have changed. We've all changed. Society's changed. It's a whole different scenario. And they want a center where people are brought in, people on drug situations, mental problems, acute mental problems, and criminals. So you have the three different entities. There'll be professionals there to diagnose them, get them set where they have to be, and possibly keep some in certain cells, but they're medical situations. There'll also be a court there, and at the right time, everything will be there. That transferring people back and forth is timely. It takes professionals to do that. Costly. Everything is costly. Everything is whatever. The whole project is costly, of course. I have to say, I always want to support the sheriff. I know that building's falling apart. I want to support the police agencies in our county. They really need that also because they're sending their situations with their police, with their criminal situations to the jail. But I've had several situations with citizens speaking to me, totally unrelated to each other, saying, how come the municipalities keep getting all the money? I'm not saying that's all the money. I'm just saying large portions of money. And I'm thinking we're trying to help the citizens by treating the situations so they won't be a problem for everybody. They'll be taken care of better, their situations will be dealt with, and hopefully it will be better for the citizens, better for everyone. And I've had 4 different groups or people saying to me, we have a financial situation from the federal government. I mean, the finances are in great question now. We are insecure as a nation. That's trickling down to business. Some businesses are holding back their products because they don't want to have things stagnant and have their money tied up when they can't even sell the stuff. I'm not saying all business, I'm saying some business. It's on the reports. It's logical. It's in flux right now. So it's a peculiar and bad situation all around. So citizens are having trouble. I mean, everything's so expensive for daily needs, weekly needs, monthly needs. We all know that. So someone said, people don't have money to fix a roof on their house. Why are we taking care of people who have done nothing wrong? Why don't we take care of people? Now, I don't know what the solution with that literally would be. My concentration was on the other area, but I'm not saying hit. These are logical questions. These are logical things to be brought to a commissioner. But I'll tell you, I understand where these people are coming from. And I'm going to have to talk with some commissioners about it because it was brought up at the board by one of the commissioners, and it made sense then. but it's a very delicate situation on both sides. And, yeah, I understand. I understand both sides, and it's a tightrope either way. It is. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, before we move forward on the agenda, board members, I realize I should have brought this up. Item F2 is a resolution to support a charitable gaming license application. And we do have a couple individuals here for that, and I'm concerned with the audit presentation and a couple of the other items. It could take a little while. So out of respect to the residents' time, if there's no objection, I'm going to ask that we move item F2 to item D1 so that we can.
You can just call it and we'll go from there.
Is that all right?
I don't think we need to.
Is that okay?
We're all on board.
All right, so out of respect for others' time, I'm going to jump down to item F2 regarding a resolution for a charitable gaming license. Mr. Witt, I saw you
Yeah, let me
introduce that one
jump.
on page 245.
Thank you.
happens to be.
So the township received a request from Ms. Anita Wyan, a member of Paw Support. They are requesting a resolution acknowledging that they are a nonprofit organization operating within the township. The primary purpose of this organization is to provide financial support for elderly, disabled, and low income with their pet ownership. If the board adopts the resolution tonight, it will be prepared and they'll include that in their necessary paperwork to the state. And ultimately, the state reviews everything and makes that determination as to whether or not they meet the requirements for a charitable gaming license. We're just one part of that process.
Yep. So this function involves locals from the perspective that, across the entire state of Michigan, the charitable gaming division can't really know which charities are legitimate and not legitimate. So they look to the locals. In some cases, they might be well-known charities, maybe a Little League group that has been in the township for 40 years comes forward and says, we'd like this. Paw Support is a relatively new charity, but I did reach out to the resident and ask for some references. We did call the references. Most notably, the city of Centerline did receive a donation from this organization, even, again, like I say, roughly 2 years old, to support their canine program. So I felt like, we kind of did the due diligence to make sure that, in fact, the information that they presented was legitimate, and I recommend that we adopt the resolution for Paw Support in Harrison Township, Michigan, recognizing that they are a nonprofit organization and that the state consider for approval their charitable gaming license application. Is there anyone willing to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there support?
I'll support that motion.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati?
Yes.
Mr. Backens?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose is excused. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkest?
Yes, thank you. So the clerk will prepare that, reach out to you when it's ready. You can stop by and get it, and then include that with your application. Or if it's electronic, whichever, he'll let you know. Yeah, you're good. That's why I brought you up, so you don't have to, if I could leave, I would, but I can't, so.
Yeah, my office will reach out to you tomorrow. We'll have it done probably.
Yeah. All right, then we'll jump back on the agenda to item D1 unless anyone has any objections, and we'll work on, hear our 2022 audit presentation.
So we're going to invite up our new auditor to give it from Raymond to give us a update on it. We did go through everything with him from the management side recently, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Daniel Clark, who is the principal on our project, to sort of give you a rundown of last year.
And did we put anything up or no?
You
have to turn
working
that-
on it.
Yeah. Work.
All right.
Try F4. You said F4? Or the screen connection?
To toggle the screen display. Mine's not F4. I don't know what mine is.
It's usually like F9.
I use an Apple, you just think about it.
Yeah, right, but then it also knows what you're thinking.
Yeah.
June.
It's not working, it's not working. No, it's
I'm just looking.
you're right. My 8-year-old could get it going, right?
The wife rang him up.
I text Alexis and just like fix it immediately. All I have to do is listen to her call me a boomer, and I'm like, I'm not a boomer. You don't understand.
That's exactly what a boomer would say.
I told her I'm gonna get a tattoo that says, I identify as Gen X.
I've seen nothing.
Should we just, go with it?
Take a minute, I don't care. I'll let Larry call it. I'll let Larry call it if you
Yeah.
want.
I wonder if any of our computers would work on it.
No, it's the connection. There's 2 HDMI cables, and there's something that has to be switched, I think, that might not be switched, but.
I think this is the first time we've done one with the new, with the
The
new
hardwire,
system.
with the hardwire,
Yeah.
because we're having problems with the wireless.
Mhm.
Apologize.
No, no problem. I think it's the first time we've done this.
We typically should.
We could try HDMI 2.
Anyway, say we turn it over to him, and we'll go technology list. We all have a copy of it.
Nothing?
No.
No, you all do have a copy of this, so we
Yeah,
we can just
absolutely.
do it the old-fashioned.
Do it analog.
You tried one and two? HDMI
Try
one
one
and
right
two?
now.
Okay.
It's not this.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That's right. It could be at that end too.
Yep.
Be great.
Well,
Go ahead,
Okay.
We're going
sir.
back to
Yep.
paper.
it won't go up on the display, but we got it back up here.
Maybe
so
next
good.
year. All right, so in front of you, you should have a presentation. If you flip to slide 2, this is just the things we're going to cover tonight, introduce the team members. We do have annual required board communications, talk about the financial results of the year financial statements, and then touch on upcoming accounting pronouncements, and then answer any questions, but feel free to ask questions as I go through this. Sometimes it's just easier to ask them as we're talking about it. So slide 3, my name is Daniel Clark. I am the signing principal. As was stated, Dan Merritt was the senior manager, and then we had 3 other individuals, a senior, an in charge, and a staff. So, and as also stated, this is our first year on your audit. So we obviously are all a new team for the township here in Harrison. So slide 4 is the required board communications. Happy to state, number 1, that we are issuing an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion on your December 31st, 2022 financial statement. So that's exactly what you would be looking for in an audit opinion. Number two, we're also asked to present any new accounting pronouncements that were implemented during the year. GASB 87 related to leases was implemented, and that just changed the way that those are reported statements. Number three, we're asked to assess accounting estimates, so those things such as depreciation expense, inputs that calculate your pension and OPEB liabilities, any allowance on doubtful accounts, those such things, we assess those and deem those all to be reasonable. Number four, happy to state we encountered no difficulties while performing the audit, so we appreciate Nicole and her whole staff making this a very seamless process. Sometimes it can be a bit challenging changing accounting firms, but we felt like it went very smoothly, so I'm happy to report that. All questions that we asked were answered. All information we requested was provided adequately, so thank you. As a result of that, number five, I'm happy to state that we had no material misstatements, so the records that were provided to us were clean. We didn't have any material audit adjustments, so again, that speaks to the quality of the records that you guys are getting on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. And then number six, happy to state there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies noted. So we do assess internal controls, we look at compliance-related matters, and we did not find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. There was one matter that was noted last year that we always follow up on prior year management letter comments or findings. There was a comment last year related to the way in which you allocate certain costs across funds. And there was a comment last year just stating that although those allocations are happening appropriately every year and on a consistent basis, that there has been no, official study done in the recent past to make sure that those allocations are still appropriate. So we would just recommend that you consider having a study done or some sort of kind of benchmark to make sure that those allocations are appropriately happening. And again, those were looked at. We didn't notice any issues, but just, again, would recommend that as best practice. Turn to slide 5. So you did receive an alternative compliance exam this year as well, on top of your regular financial statement audit. So anytime you receive and spend greater than $750,000 in federal money, you have to have either a single audit or, in your case, an alternative compliance exam. Because this year you did receive and spend significant ARPA funds, you did qualify for the scaled down version of a single audit. So you did spend greater than $750,000. You spent $920,000 in federal dollars. $593,000 of that was related to ARPA. So we did test those monies, and we did issue a report stating that there were no findings on how those dollars were spent. So before we move on to the financial section, any questions on those communications? Okay. So we'll move right into the general fund. We did include a 5-year look back, including the current year. So if you look all the way over to the right side in 2022, the general fund had 4.2 million in revenues. You had about 3.7 in expenditures. So you had a positive change in fund balance or net income of 464,000. You'll see over the last 5 years, you had positive results in the general fund 4 out of the 5 years. So all things are looking healthy in your general fund. The change from revenue to this year, you'll see there was about a $400,000 or $500,000 increase in revenue. That related primarily to increased state dollars that were received for revenue sharing, as well as interest interest revenue and a couple other minor changes, but most of that related to the increase in state revenue sharing. Go to the next slide, slide 7. So across all governmental funds, this is a snapshot of your 2 largest revenue line items. First and foremost are your taxes and special assessments. You'll see you brought in across all funds 9.9 million in taxes and special assessments. That has increased over the last 5 years. It went up about 900,000 in fiscal year 2022. And then that bottom line is your intergovernmental revenue, so those things from the state and federal government. You'll see that went from 2.9 to 3.9. Most of this is a result of that federal money that I spoke to earlier related to ARPA. and then a few other grants that you spent this year. So that drove a lot of that, as well as the increase in state revenue sharing, as I spoke to. Slide 8 just talks about your general fund balance. So at the end of 2022, you had $3.6 million in general fund balance. In total, an unassigned portion of that, which is almost all of it, was 3.602. You'll see that that fund balance has increased from 2019 in the last 3 fiscal years as you've received obviously positive results in the general fund each of those 3 years. And then slide 9 talks about that general fund balance in relation to annual worth of expenditures. So you're currently sitting on about 11 and a half months of general fund expenditures in your fund balance, so almost a year's worth of fund balance. You'll see that went up from about 10.7 months from last year, so again, continuing to see improvement in your general fund coverage ratio. And again, that speaks to the higher this number is, obviously you won't be running into cash flow issues, obviously can plan for the future in the event of an et cetera. And then we'll talk a little bit about your budget to actuals. So slide 10, we'll go over the general fund budget to actuals. That first set of numbers in the revenue column, you budgeted, final budget was 4.187. You brought in 4.169, so you were within 17,000 of general fund budgeted revenue, so almost exactly on target there. You budgeted 3.6 in general fund expenditures, and you spent 3.3, so you beat budget by about 216,000 in the general fund. And then you had other financing sources or uses. Most of this is your transfers. You had budgeted 309,000 for transfers, and you actually transferred about 316,000, so you were over budget only by about 6,000 in that category. So you budgeted a net income of 272, and you actually brought in 464,863, or I'm sorry, 873. So you beat your budget by about 192,000 in the general fund. Next slide is your fire fund. Same sort of information as we just presented on the general fund. You budgeted 7.195 in fire revenue. You brought in 7.210, so you beat your budget by just about 15,000, so very on target as far as revenue goes. Your expenditures, you budgeted 6.8 million, you spent 6.9 million, so you were over budget in expenditures by about 153,000. And then your other financing sources, or again, transfers, you budgeted 352,000 in transfers. The actual transfers were 184,000, so you beat budget by about 167,000 in transfers. So you had actually a net income of 29,589, so exactly on budget, about 30,000 beating budget in the fire fund. And then lastly, as far as budgets go, we'll talk about the police quickly here. You budgeted 2.4 million in police revenue. You brought in just over 2.4 in actual revenue, so you were pretty much right on target as far as revenue goes. You beat budget by about $7,000. For expenditures, you had budgeted 2.395 million, spent 2.351, so you actually beat expenditures by about 44,000. So those netted together, you beat budget by 51,984 in the police fund. And then we'll just talk briefly about the township does have pensions and other post-employment benefit liabilities. They have a general employee retirement system, and then they have a fire pension. So this slide just speaks to your funding ratio. If you look in the 2022 column, you had a net pension liability of 8.5 million in 2022. That increased about 3 million over last year. So you went from a 76% funding ratio to a 63% funding ratio. Most of that had to do with the investment losses that were experienced among all pension funds throughout the state. So no real difference from yours to others that we have seen throughout the state. And then the next slide, slide 14, is your fire pension fund. Looking all the way over to the right, you had a $15.1 million pension liability. That also increased over last year's pension liability of about 10.9 million. So you went from a funding ratio of 63% to down to 50%. And again, that is in relation to the investment losses that the pension saw during the year. And then you do have another OPEB liability. So OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. So you do provide certain medical and life insurance to your employees. And your current liability in those benefits was 22.1 million. So you were about 20% funded at the end of 2022. That's a small increase over last year's funding ratio of 19%. So you saw a small increase in your OPEB liability. And then lastly, just going to speak to your water and sewer funds and your refuse collection. So this is a 5-year look back of your water and sewer revenues. You had 9.5 million in revenues for water and sewer in 2022. That was a small increase over last year of 9.4, but you'll see over the last 5 years, your water and sewer revenue have continued to increase year over year for 5 years straight. And then that bottom line is your refuse collection that has stayed relatively flat over the last 5 years, but it has increased each year just slightly. You're at 1.26 million in refuse collection for this year, and you had 1.216 last year. And then your cash balances in those funds, you had about $6 million in cash in your water and sewer fund. You added about 400,000 to that balance from last year to this year. And then in your refuse collection, you had 158,000 compared to last year of 116,000. So you added approximately 40,000 in your refuse collection cash account. And then the last slide is just upcoming accounting pronouncements. There are a couple. Most of these really won't have much impact, if any, on the township. The one we are looking at closely and we'll work with Nikki with is GASB 96 related to subscription-based information technology arrangements. That one will be applicable for your next fiscal year, so we will work with the township and make sure they have the required tools and things to make sure that that gets implemented properly. That, and answer any questions, anybody?
So overall, good year, I guess, other than maybe some poor investment returns, which, as you said, really kind of hit pretty much everybody personally and in the pension systems throughout the state. But we're not in trouble. And seemed like it went smooth. I know one of the things that you didn't mention when we had our management review. Both Daniel and Dan had said that the preparation, the information it received, the work that Nikki put in to getting you ready for the audit made it go very smooth.
It did, yes.
Yep. So while we appreciate the work that you did, we also appreciate the work that Nikki did to get us there. And as a former auditor herself, I think she probably had an inside track on what to do.
Yeah, and Nikki's obviously the figurehead there, the point person for it, but it's a lot of people that are supporting her underneath her, both within the accounting office, but then especially in treasury and water and sewer, where they have a lot of touch points with the audit and stuff. So everyone was very responsive and supportive of the entire effort. It is a big undertaking. This is something that the accounting department starts as soon as they roll the calendar over from last year. They're closing it out and getting ready for this. This is their math Super Bowl here, and they did a great job. So.
Yep. So. All right, any questions on the auditor or questions for the auditor?
Well, just on page 4, you had mentioned under, I guess, bullet item number 6, recommendation, some type of benchmarking or study. And what was that in reference to?
So it's the fees we charge the different funds across, and they had mentioned that there's an outside firm that will come in and do a cost center evaluation to be able to make sure we can justify the expenses we're charging back to the different funds. As Mr. Huth would tell you, there are firms out there that will come and sue you for a nickel that you charge the wrong fund because they get a big share of that. So we're going to look into that this year to see if it makes sense for us or if there's a different option that works well. But we appreciate the idea to reach out to a firm that does this on a consistent basis for municipalities.
And to expand on that, the general fund, for example, Larry's office the treasurer's office falls under the general fund. We have a fire fund, We have a dedicated millage for that. The water and sewer fund is an enterprise fund, so it's a profit loss kind of a thing. You can't really, you're not supposed to make money. You do have to charge more than you spend so that eventually you have enough money to replace things underground or replace pump stations, that sort of thing. But each of those departments, for example, the fire fund and the water and sewer fund can't collect money without the function of the treasurer's office. And the fire department has payroll that needs to be made, but they don't actually make that payroll. So there are functions of the general fund that support those other funds. So, I'm shooting from the hip here, but I think we charge somewhere around $125,000 or about $10,000 a month for all the services that we provide for those departments, because they couldn't exist without this department. Auditor doesn't have a problem with that, but the last time we did a kind of an analysis to say, well, does it cost us more than 125 or less, is more than 10 years ago. And he indicated that if you've got a study that's older than 10 years, you should really take another look at it and see. And I think in the past, and we talked about this briefly, I think going back to when I first became supervisor, I think that fee was 110,000, if I remember. Does that sound right?
Might have been 100 flat.
Could have been 100, okay. But we had done a study back then that 100, and this is more than 10 years ago, that we could show greater than $100,000 in expenses. So, I'm not necessarily the accounting guy as much as more of an engineering or logic guy. If 10 years ago we could prove it was worth more than $100,000, why did I need to do a study that it only went up 25% over a dozen years? But the auditor's saying that's really kind of one of those things that, while I appreciate what he appreciates what I think, we really should have data to back that up and not anecdotal data. So
Does that include the administrating the school taxes?
that's different.
Is that
That's a
more
negotiated
flat?
fee. I don't believe that's something that's a
That's
part of the
completely
audit.
different, yeah.
Right. But this is, because what it is I'm saying to my left hand, I'm gonna charge my left hand, and pay it to my right hand. Well, there's the potential, I guess I don't want to say for corruption, but is the number that we choose.
Well, the voters approved a millage that said we are funding fire with this money, not.
General fund.
General fund. So you have to be justified in saying that this millage is supporting fire when we transfer money over, because it covers payroll, it covers accounts payable, that kind
Right.
of stuff.
So when it's an outside party and you negotiate, it's probably a little bit different. I mean,
It's more of a fee for service.
Right. But if the school district agrees and MISD agrees and we agree, and we can compare that to 7, 8, 10 other municipalities, there's some proof there. But in our case, it's really a number that we come up with. So there's, less, dependence on, more internal control risk, I guess,
So
maybe.
that wouldn't really be part of this?
No. Right? I mean, yeah.
That's correct.
Right, yeah. Any other questions, issues?
We'd just be looking for a motion to receive and file.
Yeah,
And
so if
they would
everybody's-
work with Nikki to make sure it gets submitted to the state. We'll
Yeah, it
apply
is due June 30th, so obviously that will be done before.
And I know in our management discussion, we talked about some other internal action items, which I know Nikki is working on, that'll probably come to the board, maybe some other internal transfers, things like that. We've got some policy saying, hey, if we've got a fund balance here, we should disperse that using this percentage. But that would come that's not a function of the audit as much as it is a product of the audit for future board
Our
action.
data is set in stone for last year. We know where we stand.
Correct, right. We may bring at a future meeting, maybe we should put some more money into the OPEB. If we were up 400,000, maybe we should take some of that and put that into the OPEB account to try to increase that funding level for the future. So,
Make a motion to accept the 2022 audit and submit the audit to the state as required by the end of June.
all right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Brado. We had some discussion, questions. Is there further discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board, and thank you to Raymond for taking care of us on our 2022 audit.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too. All right, this takes up a big part of the board packet, so I see we're jumping down to
235.
235, just got there. So item E1, let's see. Are you familiar?
I'm
with
happy
it?
to
I was
speak
going
to
to
this,
say, because
sir,
I don't
yes.
know that I'm familiar. I usually do water and sewer, but I don't know this one.
Yep, we received communication from John Axe, who is the township's bond attorney, but he's also representing the Oklahoma-Macomb Interceptor Drainage District in their most recent bond issuance. OMID, the Oklahoma-Macomb Interceptor District, acts as a regional authority to oversee the sanitary sewers, which convey the waste from a number of member communities to the treatment facility in Detroit. They've made numerous improvements, and these are funded through bonds taken out by the OMID board. Attaches a resolution that is necessary in connection with the most recent bond sale that is upcoming for the OMID counties of Oakland and Macomb bonds, limited tax general obligation, Series 2020B, their 2023 issue, which is being sold at a competitive sale this week, and then with money being delivered next month. But Harrison Township's share of the bond issue exceeds the threshold in federal securities law, and therefore requires the township to provide this information, disclosure information, annually over the course of the bond. So this resolution simply allows the supervisor, clerk, and treasurer to act on the township's behalf to file those annual the disclosure statements as required. We were already I talked with Nikki about how we would do this going forward, and she's been working with the auditor to see what we actually need to do and make sure we meet all the requirements. But it is one of those things where I looked at the numbers and I said, something doesn't add up, and I called Mr. Axe and he walked me through everything, and at a certain point you're deferring to the person that wrote the bond law and said, like, you need to do this, and it doesn't change whether or not we owe the money on the bond, but he's saying we need to adopt this resolution because our share of it exceeds those levels, so.
And this is just based on flow percentages through shared underground assets that really serve, multiple municipalities across 2 counties. So the formula's, based on a rolling average. I think the total amount of work that's anticipated is about a little over $6 million, right?
That's simply the bond amount.
Right, that's the project, okay.
That's the bond amount. The project exceeds that, I guess, a number, that was where some of my confusion came in as far as a percentage. I'm like, well, if we're only this, how are we that? But a lot of communities chose to prepay on this one for whatever reason. Maybe because they are in a similar position where they said like, oh, look, we have extra money because we got a lot of federal money kind of thing. But that was the choices they made. So our share of the project bonds is larger than it might normally be if everyone was using the financing.
Right. Bottom line, there's a certain amount of work that Candace Miller and her office, Public Works, is doing to make sure that we don't have sinkholes, to make sure that our major regional underground assets are secured. And I have little doubt in the need for that work and little doubt in the efficiency because we've had some really good experiences, discounting. I know that she was successful in getting some insurance money for the original sinkhole back in 2016. So, at this point, we're kind of part of a regional asset, and we have a share. I see this as kind of red tape or paperwork that we need to do to make sure that we continue to pay our portion of this regional asset. And although I'd rather not pay it, it's a fraction of what it would take for us to say we're breaking away. I mean, a ridiculous fraction of what it would take for us to have our own treatment facility. So this is a resolution.
Yeah.
So it would require a motion with second and a roll call vote. The resolution is in the board packet. So be looking for
I'll make a motion to adopt the OMID Bond Series 2020B 2023 issued resolution as presented.
all right, is there support?
Support.
All right. Any discussion, questions, board members?
Well, the only number that I see in this whole thing is a $6 million number. Does it not get into detail on how much each? community-
So the number keeps changing.
What is it, 200,000 or 2 million?
Our share exceeds $1 million. But it's not 100% finalized. But there was a number of communities that had prepaid, so our share is rather large at this bond.
So the total scope of work is not $6 million, of which we have $1 million of obligation. The total scope is greater, but of those municipalities that are not in the position to prepay their bond payment. The total bond amount is $6 million. I think the question, though, is a valid one, right? So this is a function we need to do to satisfy certain legal requirements. But the reality is, and I'm not sure that I'm even on the right track, and I don't want to put Mr. Huth on this, but sometime back, in other words, at this point, I don't know when that would be, but at some point prior to all of this, we would have had to say, we're going to fight this or not be a part of these bonds. But I kind of feel like at this point, when Public Works determines that there's a need to make a certain amount of repairs, there are public meetings and there are things that you can attend and so on and so forth. But at this point, it would be difficult for us to say, well, we object to participating in these payments without probably incurring legal expenses and, of a significant amount and losing. I mean, I don't know that's the point. So this is kind of a tricky one because I see your question, and this doesn't really have the breakdown of the total project or the costs, because this was to satisfy an obligation from a legal perspective regarding the size of the bond.
Yeah, so as the latest information I had, and it has changed several times, like that I've been made aware of after the fact, but so of the total project, Oakland County is 13.5%, Macomb County is 86.4%, and so our percentage of that is almost 11% of the total project as it exists.
So this has to do with where it's at. So for example,
Yeah.
let's say that there's a need to repair a section of the sanitary underground system north of 23 Mile. Don't ask me to pay for it because nothing that I flush flows through there, right? So it clearly, if it's after those points where we connect, now we have an obligation because that part of the system is necessary for us to function. So depending on where that falls, if it's far enough down the system and it serves everybody, our percentages become less. And if, I can't say for certain, but I think the stuff that Nikki sent me was right around, it was pretty much south of the corridor. It's down toward 8 Mile or something like that. It's flowing, this is at southern Macomb County, this work. But to look at a regional map of the system, there's so many different named interceptors, and each of those have a division of flow. I can tell you that, unfortunately, with the high water that we experienced in 19 and 20, our percentages increased because the water table was so much higher and there was a lot more infiltration. As the water table goes up, we see higher flows than dry or low water years. So our percentage of the entire OMID system has gone up, based on rolling 5-year averages.
Does that reflect in the fact that, does Macomb County pay more because of the sinkhole collapse on 15 Mile Road?
Well, no, so what I would say is Macomb, so what happened is that these regional assets used to be City of Detroit or DWSD. Long time ago, well, when I say long time ago, I think 2012, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not certain. There were some lawsuits, federal lawsuits, and it was determined, okay, they're no longer Detroit assets, they're the assets of Oakland and Macomb County. So when you say, does Macomb County have to pay more, what I would say is no. Macomb County Public Works Office has identified necessary improvements, and everybody whose sanitary flow goes through there is going to pay for a portion of those. So the decision on what to repair and when and how to repair is ultimately the responsibility of Public Works. Unlike our prior Public Works Commissioner, there are public meetings. I get data every time there's one of these meetings. I get minutes from the meetings. But, no one municipality is in a position to go in and say, wait a minute, based on my knowledge of 8-foot diameter underground interceptors, I think you need to do this or that. So,
Well, this is a 17.5-foot pipe that they're rehabilitating, and then 5 1,000 horsepower sewage pumps that they're installing. So it's a rather substantial
Right, so it isn't the kind of thing where I say, well, let me take a look at those plans and see if I can find a material deficiency. It's way over anyone's head. It's just, regional systems like this are, I'm sure there are states in our nation that don't even have assets this large, other than large metropolitan areas, so.
Is it gonna cut down on Oakland County's dumping in our lake, or?
I
Is
don't-
it part of the improvement?
No.
You know?
No, so spirit of the answer, I mean, obviously improving the system is better for the environment no matter what. But this is saying there are underground assets that currently are reaching their life expectancy. Those pumps, right? One could argue that if I need 5,000 horsepower pumps and they need to be replaced, and that's, whatever 5,000 horsepower can flow, if they're not functioning properly, then yeah, there's a point where the operators of this regional system say, hey, you need to stop sending us stuff because we can't take anymore, and you need to start either retaining it or releasing it. So any improvement to the system can't hurt, but this isn't, I wouldn't want to represent this as, this is gonna stop sanitary, this is not gonna significantly modify CSOs.
No, but it does limit the amount of infiltration when you're repairing those large
Correct,
pipes.
right.
Because those, if they are seeping, what this does is protects that from the additional seepage. So essentially, we end up paying to treat rainwater that is infiltrated down into the pipe.
And we can't accept less.
Right.
Because the system's overloaded with infiltration.
Right.
And 5,000 horsepower, a bank of pumps totaling 5,000 horsepower are maybe operating at 70% efficiency, and maybe newer pumps, more modern pumps, and, maybe can handle more, and therefore minimize by a small amount the number of times there might be a CSO. But I wouldn't want it to represent like the single purpose of this is to reduce CSOs, right? I would say it has a negligible effect. When you have a wet weather event in Oakland County, these improvements are not going to radically change the amount of overflows. But if we don't do this, we're all going to have overflows in our homes. That's what I would say.
And realistically, I mean, this isn't a decision point for us to say we're in or out. We're part of a district, and Macomb County's Board of Commissioners already adopted a resolution saying that, yes, we approve of this project and this bond issuance.
Right.
We're just saying, yes, we're allowing the 3 full-time officials to submit the required paperwork annually.
Right, so that it doesn't require
It's not-
annual board action.
Yeah, it's not a decision point. We're saying, we're in, we're out, we're up, we're down, we're gonna do projects, we're not. We're just saying, yes, we're adopting a resolution that gives us the authority to sign something.
Right, any other questions?
Make a motion?
I think we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello. We're just in a discussion phase. Is there further discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Backens?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati?
Yes.
Mrs. Rosa excused. Mr. Verkest?
Yes. We are next at item F1 from the clerk's office, which is pertaining to a cost for residents for a notary service.
Yes, sir. So right now, the clerk's office charges $4.
$2.44.
We charge $4 for our notary fees to anybody that comes in the township. But we only budget $150 worth of income, and I don't think we've even seen anything close to that at this point. The township has notaries. My office is all notaries. We have to be notaries just for the business of the township. We service different things where it requires that to be there. So it's not like we could get rid of the ability to be notaries. But in reviewing our peer communities, a lot of them have gotten away from charging residents because it's obviously something the residents would have to pay for no matter what. And they paid for my bond to be a notary. They paid for my application. So we feel like at this point, we would recommend that the board eliminate the notary fees for residents. And then we're going to look at charging non-residents $10 fee for any notary services. That $10 is set in state law. That's the maximum that you can charge. That's why we picked that number. It wasn't out of a hat. But the budget impact is obviously negligible, but we just feel like it would be a better service to our residents.
I'll make that motion.
I'll support that motion.
All right, got a motion by Mr. Tominello, with support by Mr. Olgiati.
I think that's a great way to streamline services and offer more services to our residents.
Yeah, it's almost a nuisance. $4. I mean, what the heck, right?
Well, in the end, it costs us more to charge somebody $4 because we're writing paper receipts and they're.
Yeah.
it's-
I think it's a great thing.
Absolutely.
Now, Adam, does that require an appointment? Or can you just come into the clerk's office?
We handle them as a walk-up.
Okay.
It's not something we do a ton of either. It's,
Yeah, a lot of times, and I
we have
would say,
we have a lot of regulars that come in. We have some people that every year they have to fill out a pension paperwork. We'll see them on an annual basis.
sure. But sometimes you have folks that call and say, hey, if you can come on in tomorrow or come this time or
Absolutely.
whatever, so.
Yeah, if it ever got to the point where we were seeing a steady flow because everyone's like, wow, it's free, I'm gonna notarize everything.
Right.
We have a scheduling software that we pay for and we would utilize that, but it's not something that we expect.
Probably never gonna happen.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, had some discussion. Is there further discussion on this, motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Board.
All right, next on the agenda. Let's see, Oop, there we go. Item G1. Board members, due to various ordinance violations that occur and affect each township department, the collection of monetary funds for these violations have been adjusted accordingly for each department. The method of enforcement and collection of violations are referenced in the ordinance. We have before us an introduction for an ordinance to amend chapters 2, 72, 94, and 62 of the Harrison Township Code of Ordinances to establish a municipal civil infraction bureau, revise requirements for changeable copy signs, revise appeal procedures for the denial of sign permits, amend definition and offense of disorderly persons, and to provide for a civil responsibility violation within the township, providing for repealer, severability, penalties, and effective date. So multiple revisions to the ordinance. I know that the Municipal Civil Infraction Bureau was something that we had looked at in the past, which was primarily for the building department, ordinance department, as I understand it. We looked at streamlining that, but when we made that revision, we realized that it took away some of the, I guess I'll say, options or powers within our water and sewer department. And based on some work between our building official, our public services director, Rosemary from Mr. Huth's office that kind of helps us with these things, we determined that it would be better to reinstate the Municipal Civil Infraction Bureau to give that option back to the water and sewer department. But then there were also some other revisions. Generally speaking, when we do this, you got a handful of things. All right, we got enough things to take care of that, let's do this. Instead of going through this process of amending our ordinances one at a time, it becomes costly, so we have a handful of them. The appeal procedure for the sign permits, that ties to the most recent legal case. Is that true, Mr. Huth, where we looked at the
Building Board of
BBA
Appeals.
versus ZBA, and we recently voted on a one-off with the 5 stars recent application to change this. This sort of codifies that action. These are ultimately driven by internal issues within our building, water and sewer department, zoning and planning, and so forth. So this adoption would begin or introduce these various amendments to our ordinances.
The other one that I am excited to see in here is that we won't see every single time somebody puts a piling in the lake come to us.
Correct.
So that's being changed to allow for the building official to review those and if necessary, bring in the engineer and go through that process to make sure. We're not the DNR, we're not the Army Corps, we don't have the same level of resources they have to review those types of projects, and I think it makes sense to take it away from this board level.
Yeah, and it also streamlines that application process for our residents. If they're able to get Army Corps and Eagle approval for construction in the water, it doesn't need to come before us. And I think that really ultimately, in my time, 15 years on the board, I don't think we ever said no to construction in the lake, but there were some examples where that construction in the lake was large, and so prior board said, hey, if you're going to do anything in the lake, we need to know about it. This kind of just says, if it's within if it's somebody's backyard and they're putting in a boat hoist, we don't need to know about it. If you want to go several hundred feet out into the lake it needs to come back before the Board of Trustees. So that's going to reduce not only the amount of time that our residents need to go through this extra step, but every time they do want to do marine construction in the lake, they have to pay whatever fee our engineering firm charges to review that and give a recommendation. So it's going to reduce fees, you know, a couple times a year, what do we do? Probably 3 of those a year, 4 of those a year, something like that. So kind of streamline that as well. So questions, discussion, is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to introduce an ordinance to amend chapters 2, 72, 94, and 62 of the Harrison Township Code of Ordinances to establish a municipal civil infraction bureau, revise requirements for changeable copy signs, revise appeal procedures for the denial of sign permits, amend definition and offense of disorderly persons, and to provide for a civil responsibility violation within the township, providing for repeal or severability penalties and effective date.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado. Any discussion, board members?
So the disorderly person means any of the following. It's quite a lengthy list. I guess the question's for Mr. Huth. Is this just basically something that's just legally covers us on these situations?
I think this revision is a response to the court's kind of sending direction that it does not like, the courts don't like overly broad disorderly person ordinances because the fear is that police officers would abuse discretion and just call anything disorderly. So this gives the deputies here an opportunity to pinpoint exactly what it was that is disorderly, put it in the complaint, and then when you take it to the court, you don't run into a situation where someone says, gee, that's vague, not sure that I violated that, so it's just a response to that.
So this isn't necessarily something we're driving, this is something kind of being driven, kind of maybe as a reaction to what the courts are steering municipalities toward.
100% the case, yes.
Yep, okay. So, and ultimately, we didn't, I mean, it's your office that wrote these definitions based on kind of some guidance, some common.
What we're seeing, we get updates and just what we're seeing in terms of those updates.
Mhm. Fair enough?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
That answer. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado to introduce this ordinance. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Batkins?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose is excused. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Verkowski?
Yes. Thank you, board. I reckon we'll be seeing that back in a few weeks with,
Yes, sir.
to adopt it once it's published and so forth. Looks like that's the end of the business agenda. So next on the agenda is item H, which is public comments. Public comments can be about anything that you wish. We ask that you try to limit them to 5 minutes in length. So we'll open the floor right now for public comments.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Mulder. I live at 39488 East Archer. I would like to ask the Township Board to address two growing concerns within the township. The first is the growing business of food trucks and where they're able to operate. While there isn't a current ordinance specifically addressing the operation or location of food trucks, it does create a non-conforming use under Chapter 22, Section 65 of the Harrison Township Code of Ordinances. Food trucks have become more popular in the last decade and are a great option for locations without food services to provide a temporary on-site food sales for events. The use of food trucks should not in any way be used to undermine the current restaurant businesses located within the township. Clinton Township recently adopted Chapter 820 to their Code of Ordinances to regulate food truck vehicles and the location, licensing, and permitting. And CNG newspapers ran an article on June 19th featuring information from the Clinton Township Board of Trustees meeting where the Supervisor's Office and Community Relations and Media Services Department said they will make a page on the township website to help food truck operators find the information they need to do business within the township and are hoping that surrounding communities will do something similar to make the services in the area more consistent. The second is the growing number of golf carts being operated within the township. They're being operated on public roads, sidewalks, and bike paths, not just on private property. The Michigan Vehicle Code, Chapter 257, Section 657A, addresses how a city, village, or township with a population under 30,000 individuals can allow the operation of golf carts subject to the requirements of Section 657A. A resolution using these requirements would allow the township and Macomb County Sheriff's Department to effectively regulate the possible unsafe operation of golf carts within the township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ramona Romero. I'm a long-term resident of Harrison Township, and I'm also a member of the Beautification Commission. I would like to read to you a petition that I have been circulating for the last 5 days. I've gotten approximately, well, now it's exactly 90 signatures. The petition goes as this. We, the undersigned, believe that the Veterans Memorial Garden in Harrison Township should remain dedicated to all veterans, not to one single individual. The Harrison Township Board of Trustees recently approved a motion to rename the Veterans Memorial Garden outside Rosso Hall to the Lieutenant Colonel Donald Digger Odell Memorial Garden. While we oppose the name change, we do not oppose honoring Lieutenant Digger Odell by having another garden built elsewhere in the township dedicated to him. We only ask that the garden that is already dedicated to all veterans remain dedicated to all veterans. I do not personally know Lieutenant Digger Odell. However, while circulating this petition, I've talked to many residents who did know him, and they thought of him as a humble man. I do not think that he would approve of the Veterans Memorial Garden name being changed, being that he was so humble. He was also at the dedication as a guest, and at that time it was named the Veterans Memorial Garden. It should be then kept that. I would like you to know that at our beautification meeting approximately a year ago, we did discuss the vote to change the things on the Memorial Garden, and the result of the vote was not to be supported. The Harrison Township residents that I spoke to agreed to a garden elsewhere in the township for Mr. Odell, but just not changing our Veterans Garden. Let's make a nice garden for him elsewhere. Use the arch and all the signs that the beautification talked about, but please don't put it there. Let's make it somewhere else nice for him. Myself and many residents are asking for you to reconsider your vote. What can we, the residents, do to convince you that we want this to remain as is? I've only got 90 signatures, but let us know what you want us to do to let you know this is important to us. We want to keep the Veterans Memorial Garden a symbol for all veterans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Zinner, Commissioner. Mona had come to me and asked me about what to do with this. And I just want to say that I couldn't make a decision on this myself. My father-in-law was very close friends with Digger Odell. We knew the family. We know the family. They're all very nice. And, I mean, Digger Odell is known around the world, I'm sure. He's known around the country. How many people in Harrison Township know him? I wouldn't have an idea. Mona's right. He was an incredibly humble person. His wife is a humble person. They're just a wonderful group of people, wonderful family. I didn't know this. I read it in the paper that this was going to be going on. I think it's very nice. I hope you will consider that, as I said, I couldn't make the decision on that, the citizens that are looking at this, and I talked to Susie today about it, and again, she's so humble. I told her everybody has such respect for Digger and for her and for the family. I was in tears just trying to tell her how much people care about them. And she said she appreciated all that. I said, because you hear people talking, I wanted her to be aware. And they did too. And so it isn't something trite when these people say the Veterans Memorial that they've had for, I think, 30 years, that their families are there. I mean, if this monument is continued, which it may be, probably will be, possibly it will draw people to it, and maybe often people are visiting it, doing things, and they'll walk around and see the other names behind. That is not an uncommon thing to think of. People walk around and they see the names. When I'm there for events, I'm waiting or before or after an event, and I'm looking at the names, and they say, oh, I've heard of that family, I know that family, I know somebody. And so it's kind of, even for the people whose feelings are hurt, that it's a change, and they feel their family's as important as Digger Odell to them. That's what's important. So I'm sure you won't take it as trite. And please understand where these people are coming from. To them, their family's Digger Odell. And he was in a completely different situation, but it's still their family. And I think it could work out favorably. And I don't know how many people will feel that way, same way Mona and others. I think maybe 50-50, I have no idea. But I know you will be respectful, care about the citizens as I do. Best for.
Thank you.
Board members, residents, C. William Bardell, 26-year resident, clean cut, do-gooder boy next door, clean up, fix up, people helping people. Just want to remind everyone, check out Save Lake St. Clair Facebook, follow, stay up to date on everything that's going on, and everybody stay safe this summer, and use the buddy system when you're out on the lake, and drink plenty of fluids, get plenty of sleep, don't overdo it out there, and we want to have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. I'll do my best to address or offer some comments for the residents. We did hear from a resident regarding food trucks. It's kind of a growing issue. You know, I can't really say, you know, when it started, but certainly it's exploded for sure, right? I don't remember food trucks when I was a kid. I'm sure there were somewhere. I remember, roach coaches coming to the shop, but they never came to a neighborhood. Clinton Township did adopt a food truck ordinance. I've been working with their deputy supervisor, and I guess I would say right now they are not happy with the ordinance and the way it's working, their amount of compliance. They're making an effort to try to look at this at a county level. So imagine that every municipality is going to go through the business of licensing and inspecting a truck. I don't have the resources to do that. Well, I don't disagree that it's a concern, I guess my word. This is kind of a wait and see attitude before we, I think there's a lot of other folks that probably have deeper pockets, bigger resources, trying to come up with some model ordinances on this. It hasn't, at this point, frankly, I don't believe it's a massive problem in Harrison Township. It's one we're keeping an eye on, and it's growing, but so far I haven't spoken with a peer who's figured out a good way to regulate it. So I agree we need to keep an eye on it, and it's probably going to be something that has to be addressed eventually. As it stands right now, I can't say that I'm aware of a model ordinance that I think is the one to use, adopt, and put into place. But it's on my radar, I can say that. Golf carts, kind of similar. Had some conversations with the sheriff's office and command staff, and it really is kind of a difficult issue to address. I recognize that we do have the option to opt in, and again, from what I know right now, I don't think that's the best action for us to take, but let's just say that there are some things that are pretty easy to address. There are some ordinance issues that I could take 90% of the residents and they could all say, yep, this is probably how you should handle this. These two are a couple of issues that are a little bit more 50-50 gray. I don't know what words you want to use, but a little bit more of a challenge. So I appreciate the residents' comments. I don't disagree. I think someday we're going to have to address and resolve these things, but these are things that we're not, as a lifelong resident, when I was a kid, these weren't an issue. They weren't as prevalent as they are today. And so eventually it's going to require that, but neither of them, I think, are easy to tackle. We heard from a resident regarding the Veterans Memorial. I believe there's a little bit of a confusion. So let's back up here. Initially, there was a small monument placed there. I don't know where, the stone monument that was there. I don't know much about that history. In the 90s, our supervisor at the time, Candace Miller, expanded that memorial park. We are not renaming the park. We're not changing the name. It's still Veterans Memorial Park. Nothing is changing. We're going to add to it and take a section of it and dedicate it in Digger Odell's name. So you can collect signatures. We're not renaming it. We're not changing honoring all vets. It is still the Harrison Township Veterans Memorial Park. That doesn't change. Nothing that's existing there is changing. We're not renaming it. We're naming the garden and a sculpture for him. So the name is not being changed. There were things there, probably the first monument was probably placed there before I was born. Second expansion of that was done in the 90s. When I look in 2000, the aerial photography in 2000 doesn't look the way it does now. So that park has been expanded and improved over time. This is just an addition of a sculpture with some plaques describing the history and some of the things about Digger Odell. He was truly an exceptional man. He was there. He was there as a guest and a speaker. We're not deciding whether he's humble enough to think. We're merely saying we want to recognize the service that he gave. He is probably one of the more famous residents of Harrison Township, and I think it's fitting to recognize him. Nobody is changing any name, and no one is taking anything away from any existing veteran who's recognized there. We're not changing the name. It is still the same park. It is still the same name, but we are going to dedicate a portion of it, which we're going to construct, to Digger Odell. Barb, I'm sorry. No, public comment is closed. Our county commissioner said it's a change. It's not a change. It's an addition. So whether I build a garden there or whether I build a garden somewhere else, it doesn't change anything. There's room. 30 years from now, there may be another exceptional man or woman who serves, who has, who the community feels is worthy of recognition, and there may be an addition again. So it's a park that's been there forever. I don't know of any time. The aerial photography shows nothing ever being there other than the initial stone monument. There was an expansion in the 90s. Since the 2000s, there's been additional gardens added. We're merely proposing to add something additional, recognizing Digger Odell. But it's not renaming the garden or the park. So that's the best that I can respond. I can't support a notion of saying, please don't change the name when there's been no action by this board to change the name. The action by this board is to add additional things there and dedicate those additional things to Digger Odell. And while there are some wonderful folks there, I think there's a need for our citizens to know the service that this man gave and the things that he said. When he spoke here, you're right, he was a humble fellow, a pretty quiet guy, but you could have heard a pin drop in here. He spoke very low, and everybody was tuned in because he had really quite a story to tell, and I think it's important that we pass that story on to people in the future. So Any other board comment?
I got, I guess two things. I did want to comment, and you touched on it regarding the golf carts. There are young kids driving golf carts, sitting way up on the seat, 5 or 6 kids hanging off. Personally, I hate to see somebody get hurt, so I would like some type of plan to talk to the.
And I hate to
they're
interrupt,
already
Jim,
illegal.
but we'll never allow that. When we pick the poster child of frankly, I'm sorry, irresponsible parents who are allowing young children, way too young, to operate a motorized vehicle on a street, that'll never be legal. That's already illegal now. It's always been illegal. And I encourage the command staff to tell the deputies that when they see it, at a bare minimum, issue a warning, ride them home, talk to mom and dad. No matter what ordinance we ever adopt, that'll never be allowed. So that's enforceable, and it's wrong. And I, to your point, there's folks there that say, what's the harm? And there's going to be harm sometimes. Something's going to happen. And it happened when we were kids, right? There was somebody who'd rented a motorbike, did something they shouldn't have done, and it was against the law. So we'll never allow that, no matter what ordinance we ever adopt.
Okay. Well, it is getting more and more prevalent
It
around
is.
my subdivision.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
see it a lot, so. The second thing is I had sent an email to the Board of Trustees regarding the first responder day. Did you happen to see that?
I did.
I know you got, I know you were,
Yeah, we were,
yeah, so.
I didn't even have a
just
signal
look
where we were
into
at.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can just maybe get back to us the next board meeting. or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, I think it's a great
See
idea.
if you think that'll work, if it,
Yeah,
it's a
at this
nice fall
point-
day.
At this point, we're pretty close, if we haven't, to turning off the lights at the substation to stop the fish flies.
Yeah.
Next couple of weeks, bad idea to do an open house there.
Yeah, no.
It'll just be an open door for fish flies to fly in.
So maybe fall is.
But I think
that is
fall's a good one.
First responder day. and
Absolutely.
maybe that'll
Oh,
work
I
out
think it's a
good.
great idea. I like it. I didn't have a chance, like I say, where we were camping, we didn't
Yeah.
have a signal. I actually had to drive up a mountain to catch a signal, so that was, I said to somebody, actually, another camper that just came in as we were leaving, I said, well, if you go here, you can get a signal. And the guy said, what do I want to do that for? That's why I'm here camping. I don't want a signal, so. All right, any other board comment?
Mr. Supervisor, would it make sense for me to bring to the planning commission and the planner asking to craft a ordinance tied to food trucks?
I think that would be a regulatory ordinance.
It
and not
would
a-
be.
And
It
so it
would
really
be.
wouldn't be a planning commission.
No, but we
item.
could initiate it, and it would be a task performed by both the attorney and the planner.
Before I'd answer that, what I would say is I would encourage you as the board liaison to the planning commission to talk to anyone else, whether it's a municipality or whether it's our planner himself, and make sure, before you take on that task, to make sure you have an idea of what a challenge it is, because once you take that on, it's,
I mean, here's the thing. We already have a vendor's ordinance that says it is illegal to have a food truck in Harrison Township, and it doesn't stop them because they're there for 3 hours and then they're gone. Our enforcement action from a code enforcement standpoint is please don't do that anymore, and they have an opportunity to stop doing it. So it's already illegal. They already have a process to come in and apply for a permit for a 3-day event and be able to go through and sell that. It just has to comply with all our zoning requirements and it has to jump through all these hoops. The people that use them now are doing it without any permits and without any approval. We've never issued a food truck permit for somebody to do sales.
but we have a process.
Right, but we have a process. No one's ever done it because they're 3-hour events that no one's ever gonna jump through. Whatever hoop we craft, and that's the problem with it, is we can't create a net that's gonna catch this person to where the cops are gonna come and kick that truck out if they don't follow the rules. It's one of those things that's such a fleeting problem. You know, if it's a business that all of a sudden has it and it's causing an issue, then it becomes they're blocking the road, they're causing issues for health and safety, then the police are gonna go out and do it. But if somebody has a party and like there's homeowners that'll have a party and the food truck shows up and they come and go, nobody's looking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
And Clinton Township, and that was the message from Clinton Township. They went through this great length to craft an ordinance, nobody follows it. And that's why I'm saying.
Okay, that's fine.
It is a hairy monster. It's not an easy thing to just say, I'm gonna put these rules in place and corral this thing and have it under control.
You might want to look at how St. Clair Shores is, because I know that old Irma's ice cream shop on 10 Mile, it's called Bob Burgers or something now, and
Okay.
they actually have a food truck, like a pseudo food truck, right next to the building itself.
Mhm.
They obviously don't have the cooking facilities in there.
Right.
I've driven it by, so that might be something you might want to look into. I know food trucks are licensed and regulated through Macomb County Health Department, just like a brick and mortar.
But
restaurant is.
from the health, they don't regulate the
They don't
vehicles.
regulate the vehicle, no.
Right, and so that's a part of it, because once you take on a licensing, how much responsibility are we taking on? I recognize that it's a concern, but I don't see it as this massive concern. It's a challenge, let's just say.
Okay, I will follow up with the planner.
Yeah, I would say, because I feel like it's, and take a look at what we already have. I want to say Jan helped with that whole process,
Well, and
that
I-
outdoor sales.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have a process that people can go through if they want to get a permit. People don't. You know what I mean? Like, you can't catch everybody, and again, it's one of those things that doesn't, I know it's more, but it's still not that often, and
And again, Clinton Township, and I want to be cautious in saying this, but Clinton Township, St. Clair Shores both have their own police department. And, Macomb County Sheriff's Office does an excellent job for a very, very reasonable amount, but ultimately they kind of a little bit answer to the sheriff there. So I don't get to say, hey, when X happens, I want the police officers to do this. There's a finite amount of that responsibility, some of which you lose when you contract with an agency that operates in multiple communities, because they're going to try to do things a little more consistent. So that is a part of the enforcement challenge. So, any other board comment? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
All right, motion by Mr. Badkin, support by Mr. Tominello. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.